Hey guys, Delaney here. This is part 2 of our lambing prep series. If you have not watched part 1, I suggest going back and listening. A lot more will make sense once you listen to that video before getting into this one. This one is sort of a end to the prep list that we started in part 1. We're going to finish off the needs, need to haves, and the wants. And then we're also going to touch a little bit on how to get some of these items for cheap or for free. For those of you who've watched one and are ready to go, let's get started. Okay, so we'll just get into part 2 and just hop right in. We are currently going to be going through our needs list, and this is the capital NEED, absolutely need. We need to go purchase this before lambing starts. One is long vet gloves. So these are the gloves that are usually white and clear, and they go all the way up your arm. This is really handy when you have to go in and pull out a lamb. I believe we have a few left, but we're really low. So that is one of the things I need to restock up on. And then short gloves. A lot of people will do the really long gloves and then have the short, kind of tighter gloves. I didn't do that last year, and it was kind of a pain because the fingers were really big, and so I was like, oh, I need to try that next year, which is put the small ones on. We have some gloves from our milking season, but right when the lambs come, we're going to be milking, and I'm going to need those gloves. So I want to have kind of a backup box just in case I run out of what we currently have and all of a sudden I'm milking and I was like, oh no, I need gloves. And so I want to make sure that we have plenty of those for both the lambing and for milking. Last year we lambed end of March, early April, and we're pushing that forward a little bit. So lambing will be end of February, early March, and it's going to be a lot colder. So I want to make sure that we have 2 to 4 old sweaters. And the reasoning for that is you can cut the long arms off and actually use it as sort of lamb sweaters. And my plan was to go to the thrift store and pick up maybe a few sweaters that I could find that looked like it might fit a sheep, whether it's a kid's one or an adult's, but like an adult small. And then just make sure we have those on hand in case any lambs drop and it's like a freezing day. We've had some single-digit temperatures, I believe, in February, and so if there's any of those, I want to make sure that the lambs have something nice and warm to keep on them just in case. We have a heating lamp too, but I think I would feel more comfortable putting a little bit of sweatshirt wool stuff on them just to make sure that they don't get too cold. Syringes and needles. These are things that I know I have, I just don't know how much. So I'm going to go through and see what the numbers are. Needles and syringes you can go through very quickly, especially if there are problems and maybe your moms and your ewes don't recover from lambing quickly and they end up having some issues. I want to make sure I have a boatload of needles and syringes so that I'm not running to the store to buy some in the middle of lambing. It's also okay to have a bunch on hand because there's going to be some shots we have to give the lambs. There's CDT shots. And so having extra on the farm is never a bad idea. And I'm pretty sure we ran through a bunch of what we had from last year. So definitely want to store up on those. The next is my emergency contacts list. We have a later video where I talk about what happens when things go wrong. And I will talk about emergency template page that we have for you guys. But for today, I'm just sort of putting it on there as I need to fill out my own. And this is vet numbers. We have at least 2 vets, one for the dog, one for the sheep, but we could probably call either one of them for some help. There was a vet that was a little further away that we called as an emergency, and I want to make sure we have her information because if there's an emergency again, I want to make sure that I have multiple vets that I can call. And for large animals, that's not always, you don't always have a lot of options. Some people only have maybe one if they're lucky. So I know of at least 2, and then I have like my regular doctor, my regular vet for our dog, And I was like, I want to just collect as many vet numbers as I can to make sure that if we are in an emergency situation and we can't get a hold of one, which happened last year, I want to make sure we have another one so we can just make the rounds and do billion of calls just to get a hold of somebody who could help us.
Hey guys, Delaney from the editing room here. One of the things I didn't list while recording was actually friends' numbers and names and all that's on that contact list. Mostly because I have a few farm friends in the area who I have called in an emergency and they've come and helped. So those will also be on the emergency contact list. So it's vets and farm friends who can come out and help pull a lamb if you don't have the experience to know how to untangle them and get them out the right way.
The other thing we need, and I think I have them, I just need to find them, is something to apply the iodine solution to the umbilical cord. Some people use like little shot glasses. We bought stuff last year that were big containers and they're supposed to be really helpful, but they were like for cattle. And so they're very large and they waste a ton of the solution, and I don't like waste. So you can either use shot glass cups. Some people use like those squirt bottles, those with the like little tip nozzles, and they'll just kind of squirt them. We have both. I think we have shot glasses and we have like the little plastic shot glasses you can get at the dollar store. I think I bought some of those. I just have to find them. I have a squirt bottle. I also have little like milk taster cups that I could even use. So I want to kind of make sure I have a few of those because I haven't used them yet. Let's see if I can gather a bunch of different things. Not buy anything special, but just gather them together and see what works best when the time comes. Powdered milk replacer. Now, I believe we have some of this. I need to double check. But I put it on my like need list because if we don't have it, I want to make sure we do. And it's not the same as colostrum. Colostrum is given in the first few days of the lamb's life. The milk replacer is the rest. Powdered milk replacer is what comes after the colostrum. And I want to make sure I have some. We have some milk saved from last year that we could potentially use, but I would rather not use old milk for lambs, especially since their tummies are just kind of sensitive. So having some powdered milk replacer just in the back pocket in case mom passes away and she's the first one who lambs and we don't have any other moms that we've saved their milk from, I want to make sure I have some of that. That is one of those things that, again, can be at the store, but in lambing season, a lot of times they don't stock up on those things. So if it's gone, and you have to go online, and sometimes it takes forever to get here. So you don't want to be in that situation where you have a lamb who's hungry and you don't have any milk to give it. There are some other tricks that people have used where they'll use other milk sources like cow's milk or goat's milk and mix it with, I believe it was like an egg yolk or something, but I haven't done that recipe. I haven't looked it up, but that is an option too if you like are in a bind, but it's just better to have some milk replacer on hand. Another one is LA 300. This is a painkiller. We have not really done painkillers, mostly because some of the medicine we give to our sheep has a milk withdrawal period, and some of those are very, very long. And so for the LA 300, I believe it's like 28 days. So to give one of our sheep something like this, it really has to be live or die situation because I don't want to have to pull out the milk from a sheep for an entire month and have to dump it because there's the medicine still kind of getting out of the system. So I want to have it on hand, but it's sort of a last resort kind of situation. And then injectable dextrose. Now this is something that you inject into a lamb that is really, really hypothermic. So their body temperature is really low and they're really not doing well. You can't give it to them until their temperature is like at a certain temp, and I don't remember the number, so I don't want to give it to you. But they have to be at a certain temperature before you give the dextrose, but the dextrose, once you give it, will help boost that body heat and get them to a better temperature in order for them to start kind of doing a sucking reflex and kind of get milk down. And so that's one that we definitely want to have, and I think you may need a special needle for that. I need to do some more research on that one because I think it's a slightly bigger needle. I've seen people give it to lambs, and it is huge. Or maybe it's not that big, but the lambs are usually really small. But man, it's a hunkin' thing, which we don't have. So I put dextrose, but I also added the like implementation, like how to inject it, on there as well. I didn't write it in the video that you're probably seeing, but I'm writing it down now, because I just need to double check that if that is something that is different than the normal syringes and needles we have, that we make sure we have that on hand. Okay, and last but not least is our nice to haves but don't necessarily need to have. And one of them are books, sheep books, milking books. I have a few of them that I will pop up either here or somewhere on the screen to kind of show you which of the books that I personally have on hand. But they're just nice to kind of reference if you're ever in a bind and you're like, oh, I don't know. Go through their lambing chapters and just kind of mark certain things so that if you ever do need it, that it's ready on hand. You can highlight certain like doses and temperatures and all that stuff that you need. That's really nice to just be able to flip real quickly. Again, you have your phone too, so those answers can a lot of times be answered on the phone as well. But for some reason, if the internet's not working or you're out in the barn and there's no signal, it's nice to have some of those books on hand. Another one is a dewormer. This one is not so much for lambing, but it is definitely something you want to have, especially when spring hits and you have a bunch of little babies. Just to make sure that if they are starting to have bottle jaw or they look like they're not doing well and they look like, they have pale eyes and their FAMACHA score is not looking great, that you are able to hit it as quickly as you can before it gets bad. We use Prohibit, but a lot of people will use a variety of different dewormers. It really depends on your location and how your sheep actually respond to it. We used to use a different dewormer and it helped a few times, and then all of a sudden we did it once for a sheep that was really struggling and it didn't do anything. And then we grabbed a Prohibit and luckily it brought him back. But yeah, it's definitely something that you want to have on hand in case, something goes wrong and you realize it is because of worms. One of the things you can also keep on hand, we bought it our first year, but we haven't really faced the issue again, is sheep and lamb actually gets what's called pink eye. So they get a similar thing to what we get, where their eyes will kind of be all red and swollen, and it's contagious. So once one lamb has it or a sheep have it, they kind of spread it around. So if that's something that you face your first year, where the babies for some reason their eyes are kind of red and swollen, there is pink eye solution out there. I believe we still have some, so I just need to make sure that it's not gone bad. But it's not an absolutely need to have. I believe, pink eye is a virus, so if it goes through your flock, I don't think it's a live or die situation. I think it's just, it sucks because then everybody gets it, but it's like then it runs through their system and then they're fine. A knife. This one is sort of like the scissors, but I don't know. If we have scissors, I don't know if you'll need a knife, but my husband usually likes to kind of keep a pocket knife when he comes out to help. So that's one that's on the nice to haves but don't absolutely need. Hoof trimmers. A lot of people will trim the sheep's hooves while they have them contained and in their lambing jugs. We might do that. We have hoof trimmers. I don't know if I'll put them in my lambing tote, and I'll show you guys what that is. But it might be nice to have just in case I got a sheep and I'm like, what, she's kind of lethargic, she's not getting up very much, I'm just going to clip her hooves. We gave her medicine, she should spring back pretty quick, but while she's down on the ground, I'm going to trim her hooves. CDT shots, those are things we give lambs. We usually do it about 7 days after lambing, about a week, and then I think it's 2 weeks after that you give the boost, and then you don't need to do shots again for the next year. We usually give the adults the shot about a month before lambing, just so that it's in their system and maybe even can help with the babies. But it's not an absolutely need to have. You probably already have it if you give it to the parents before lambing. But it's something nice to have just so that when you're having lambs and there's so many babies running around, you're not worried about, oh, did I get the shot? I don't know. Do I have the medicine for it? I don't know. It gets a little chaotic when you have so many babies and so many sheep running around. So it's nice to sometimes have that. One of the things I also looked up, which I'd never seen this or heard of it until I saw it on another shepherd's list, was adoption musk. Now I had to look that up, and I think it's a spray you put on either the baby or the mom to kind of graft a baby onto a new mom or a different mom. I don't know if we necessarily need to do this. Some people, if they have lambs right next to each other and they want to attempt this, they'll actually use the body fluids of the mom and put it on the abandoned lamb to get it to be on mom. And sometimes that works. I've never heard this, so I don't know how well this works, but it's something I wanted to look into. Again, we live on a dairy, so pulling lambs is not really the end of the world, so I don't work too hard at trying to get the babies either back on mom or to graft it onto another one. It's just easier for me, especially with my kids who love to bottle feed lambs. It's so much easier for me to just pull and have the lambs in a separate area, then I don't have to worry about separating lambs with moms later. It just becomes a whole thing. So for me, I'm like, it's something that's an interesting idea that, if you've tried, please let me know if it works. But I don't know if it's something that I would necessarily have on my farm as a need to have. So that's why I was like, it's a maybe. So that is the last of the checklist. That's the nice to haves list. We made it. All right, we finished our lists. Now I know that this sounds like a lot and your brain's probably firing up going, oh my gosh, how much is this going to cost? But like I said in the previous video, do what you can. We started our lambing experience with probably half of what was listed, and we survived. We did okay. Yes, there were certain mistakes and things that we did that we could have done better. But to be honest, a lot of that didn't have anything to do with we didn't have the right equipment. It was more we didn't have the right experience. So for us, those kind of hiccups were more because of lack of knowledge than it was lack of items that we had on hand. Just like probably a lot of you guys out there, we had to weigh what we could afford with what we really needed. And some things just did not make the list, and that was okay. The first year, I had no idea what I was getting into, and I kind of went, oh, I don't need X, Y, and Z. If we run into that problem, I am not experienced enough to handle this, and we're going to need to call a vet anyway. So why have this stuff on hand if, you know what, I don't even know what I'm doing, and I need to call a vet? Once I had the first year of lambing kind of under my belt, then we could really expand and really know what we needed. To be honest, even the second year, you're like, oh, this happened and this happened and this happened, and I wasn't prepared for it. But you just do what you can. You survive it. You make do with what you got. And then you just know for better next year on what holes that you need to fill. The next lambing season, I had more supplies. I had friends I could call, 2 vets that I had in my back pocket for an emergency, and things still went horribly wrong. A lot of times you just got to look at yourself in the mirror and say, don't sweat the small stuff, buttercup. A good lambing has absolutely nothing to do with what you have and what you don't have. It is a roll of the dice. So don't feel guilty if something happens on the farm and you go, oh, I shoulda, coulda, woulda done this if I'd known any better, because you don't know what you don't know. And until you experience it and kind of go through it, you don't know what you need. So don't feel guilty. I know you probably will, but this is me giving you permission to be okay, to not know everything, and to still get by and to learn and to make mistakes, because that's how we all do it. That's how all farmers get all that wisdom and knowledge, is that they go through the fire and sometimes they get burned, but in the end it leaves some knowledge scars and you know better for next time. So don't go out and buy everything you could possibly ever think you would need and go into debt. As John Malcolm from Jurassic Park would say, life finds a way. And those babies are coming whether you're ready for them or not. And so just breathe. It'll be okay. The best thing that you guys can do is to watch things like this and be as prepared as possible, and to have some of those supplies that will just make life a little bit easier during lambing. On the flip side of that coin, I am also going to talk to you guys about some ways that you can get some of these items for cheaper, as well as ways to get them for free. So strap on in, folks. Here we go. Way number one is to budget and plan way ahead of when you actually need the supplies. Mostly because you don't want to have to buy everything in 1 month and have all of those expenses in 1 month's budget. Your bank account will thank you when it's syringes and needles 1 month and gloves and bottles and nipples the next. And a lot of items will go out of stock and be out during the actual lambing season. We had to wait for a prolapse harness for, I believe it was 3 or 4 months after ordering. It was lambing last year, and one of our ewes looked like maybe she was having one, and we didn't have a harness. Luckily, I was able to borrow one from my sister, but we ordered one for ourselves because we just were like, we want to have that in case something happens for next year. And it took us 3 or 4 months to actually receive the item because we purchased it during lambing season and not in the low months of the year. You really don't want to make any purchases in emergency freak out situations. I bought the harness thinking, oh my gosh, she's going to prolapse, it's going to be the worst thing ever. She ended up being absolutely fine, and so it ended up being a non-emergency because it didn't actually have the problem that I was afraid she was going to have. And so I bought the harness just kind of going, well, we need one anyway. And so then we bought it, and it took forever for it to get here, which is not the situation you want to be in. Luckily, we did have family that we could borrow one from, and they weren't lambing at that time. But that's not the case for everyone. And so for situations like that, you want to make sure that you order way ahead of the actual lambing date. And bonus, when you order things ahead of time, you can actually find some sales. Now, farming equipment doesn't always do sales. They're kind of one of those things where they know people need it, so they don't always put the sales out. But if they do have sales, you're more likely to find them during off seasons or Black Friday deals or things like that where you are able to get things on a discount. Need this now often costs more than I'll wait till I can find it used. Wink, wink. Buying used is also a really good tip to buy things on the cheap. But Delaney, I waited too long to prep for lambing. What do I do? Don't worry, just breathe. I have a few other tips that will help you get what you need on the cheaper side when you need it, and even maybe for free. One way is to ask friends. There's 2 kinds of people that can help you. One are farmer friends, and one who are not farmer friends but might actually have the supplies you need. Now, I'm going to talk about the first one and then we'll get to the second one. Farmer friends are great. They oftentimes will have a lot of the tools, a lot of the things you need, and even better, they may have some experience on how to use something else that maybe wasn't for this particular purpose, but they've either heard or they've experienced or they've done this thing that will help. You don't have to use an expensive tool for. The only con to asking a farmer friend is if they're in the same lambing rotation as you are. A lot of times they need those supplies. I'm speaking a lot to my sister who actually has sheep as well, and so far we haven't had to have lambs at the same time of the year, but I think this year we might be kind of going at the same time, and so it's going to be a little harder for us to offer to have the other one borrow something because they need it. So for farmer friends, they're really great, they're handy, they've got really a lot of knowledge, a lot of tools that they may have in the barn that they don't ever use because they've got 10 of them, but they also are going through some of the same things you are. Either they can't let you borrow because they're going through the same stuff and need it, or they can't let you have it for free because they know that they will need it eventually. So it's going to be a borrow type situation. It's not something you'll be able to keep forever. Now, the other friend that you have is the non-farmer friend, which con to that is they don't always have the kind of farm supplies that you might need, but the pro to that is that they might actually have some tools that they don't use themselves that they're willing to part with. A lot of times that'd be gardening shears, things like that, where they went through a season where they were gardening and bought all this stuff and now they have it, but they don't actually need it. And so you can ask them, and a lot of times they'll either let you borrow or give it to you for free because they go, you know what, we don't need it. We got a really good free small cage for transporting rabbits and chickens. We asked somebody at my husband's work if they had a crate that we could borrow, and some wonderful woman came up and said, hey, I have a crate, it's been at my desk, I've been waiting to see if anybody needed it to just give it to them. And so we ended up with a rabbit and chicken carrier for free because she just wanted to give it to a good home. We're a farm and we've got animals, and so it just ended up being kind of perfect, and we got it for free. Even if I say friends, I'm also talking about coworkers, people that you go to church with, people on Facebook groups or Instagram groups or whatever is out there where you can connect with people who are doing a similar thing to you. Sometimes you can find somebody in your area to help you. Even if it's simply go to this store because we know we have it, even if it's 45 minutes away, an hour away, and you never go to that store, but someone goes, hey, I know, you're kind of at the other end of the town, but over here, our Tractor Supply has it, just come by and pick up or call and figure something out. So even though I'm talking in terms of like friends and family, really it's your whole community that can be your resource to get something for free or cheap, and really dive in and lean into that community when you really need some of this stuff and you're kind of on a tight budget. When it comes to family and friends, a lot of people don't know exactly what we use on the farm. So when you're asking for certain things, be specific, but also be open to maybe other options that aren't exactly what you were looking for. A lot of people have weird stuff in their garages, and you can kind of mix match some things and put it together and actually build something. When we moved into our place, the previous owners left a ton of trash, and we threw away what we absolutely couldn't use, but we kept a lot of spare scraps and parts, and we've actually been able to build a lot of stuff for free because it was left over here, it was trash, but I was able to repurpose it and build something to use it for later. Make sure you kind of reach out and ask friends, hey, do you guys have any wood that you want to get rid of? Hey, do you guys have any wire or chicken netting or whatever? If people are gardeners, a lot of them have fencing type stuff. If you guys have anything extra, I don't need a lot, but whatever you have, I'll come by and I'll swing by and pick up. A lot of people don't want trash at their house. So offering to take their trash so that you could repurpose them to make something for your farm would get people's houses more clean and get you guys free stuff that you can actually repurpose and use for your farm. Another place that's really great to go find some items that you might need is a thrift store. So this year we are lambing a lot earlier. It's going to be a lot colder, and one of the things we need are what's called little lamb sweaters or lamb jackets. And they're just some extra covering to put on the lambs to make them not so cold when their wool hasn't really come in yet, and they can stick with mom, and mom will kind of share her body heat, but just to make sure they stay extra warm, especially if there's a lamb who's struggling a little bit. Grabbing some old sweaters and just chopping them up to fit a little lamb is enough to kind of warm their bodies up, and it's something that you could buy, and they're little buckles and it's all perfect. But if you are on a tight budget and you just need something to keep those babies warm, go to a thrift store, buy some old sweaters, and it'll be fine and they'll be nice and warm. So thrift stores really have some gems out there that you might be able to find that are super surprising, but also you can get some of that stuff on the cheaper side. Along with the thrift store, one of the things that we have near us is the Habitat for Humanity Restore. Any sort of place that resells materials and items is a really good source for some of those things. We bought a really old, kind of dingy dresser that is now out in the barn that helps store a lot of our materials. So, thrift stores and some of those restores that you might be able to find in your local area, those are really great resources to find things either cheap or for free. The next idea to get things on the cheaper side of for free is to trade. Now, this can be as simple as, hey, when the lambs come, if you'll let me borrow X, I'll let you come and do some lamb cuddles. Or I'll bake you something with the sheep's milk we have. Or we'll trade some of our eggs for this item. Trade is a big one that I think a lot of people don't do. A lot of family members will be like, oh, don't worry about it, it's fine. But in order for you to sort of build up that rapport, and maybe for the future, if someone goes, hey, I remember they were looking for this and I just found this at someone else's house, I'll pick that up for them and give it to them, and, that's awesome. We'll get some eggs out of it. You don't know what kind of doors that sort of reciprocal care for people who are helping you get your farm started. A lot of people, if you let them come and just spend some time on your farm and with your animals, they will be more than willing to offer you some stuff that they don't need or that you can borrow. Another tip is to sell some home items that you can use that money to purchase your needed farm materials. You can kind of go through your house and go, you know what, I have these kitchen tools that I've never used. And a lot of times if you sell some of that extra stuff that you have in your house, it's sort of killing two birds with one stone. You get to clean your house, get that stuff out of your house, as well as bump up your budget in order to pay for some of the items that you need for your farm. For some examples, you could do furniture, kitchen electronics, old gaming systems you don't need, clothing would be a good one. To sum it up, you have options to get things on the cheaper side and for free, and be creative on how you are going to get some of those items. You can also make a list of things I have to buy because there really isn't any way I can make that or build it. And here's the list of things where, oh my gosh, no, actually I could do this with X, Y, and Z materials. Okay, now I just need to find those materials, and maybe I can find those on the cheaper or free side. Be creative, folks, that's all I'm saying. The startup of a farm is always way more than you anticipate or budget for, but there are a lot of ways where you can kind of cut some corners so that it isn't as big of a hit your first year. All right, that's it. That is my entire list of lambing prep, along with ways to get things for cheap or on the free side. Our next video will be all about showing you me going through our stuff, going through all the supplies we have, and sorting through it, making sure it's in the right place, noting anything that we're low on or need to up the supplies on. If you are interested in watching us go through our supplies, then hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and ring that bell in order to get the notification for when part 3 comes out. You can follow us on social media at Ewe and Me Creamery. That's EWE for you, at Ewe and Me Creamery on Instagram and Facebook. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!